From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to have this time. We're back together again to understand the news with the truth in mind, with personhood as our principle, not groupthink, not collectivism, not the same old blame games. We've had enough of that. It doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't get us what we want. We have to roll up our sleeves and think for ourselves. We have to have the courage to build the future that we want, not wait for people to come save us from far off places. Washington has been trying to be our savior for a long time, and they can't do it. They are the God that has failed. They have failed over and over again. And no amount of PR that the TV corporate press wants to do for the centralized institutions and their global counterparts around the world, WHO, WTO, all these different one world pictures that they used to try to have, their visions for the future, none of them are going to survive in any serious way because they're not in charge of history. There are forces that are much bigger than the people who think they run the world. There are forces much more deeply attached to our humanity that are guiding us in the direction that those who would be king and those who would rule from far off cities just cannot even possibly grasp. And those forces have to do with the personhood revolution that Jesus inaugurated over 2,000 years ago, when he said that the first shall be last, the last shall be first, when he said that you shall see that the meek shall inherit the earth. That's the reality that we're living in. It's unfolding in front of us right now. That's the reality that we have the opportunity to be a part of. It's not the reality of the wannabe gods in D.C. or in Switzerland or in the EU Commission. Those folks who want to map out the world, they want to work together with big corporations, big business, big banks, big financial institutions, coordinating the economy, in league with the states. They think that they can map out the future for us, a kind of neo-feudalism, and that it's on autopilot and there's nothing we can do. But that is based on an erroneous assumption that they have any chance at stopping the King of history himself, Jesus. He said, I've come to bring a sword into the world. And what is that sword doing? That sword is cutting through the lies, the phony peace of towers of Babel that men have tried to create since the dawn of time. Those towers of Babel include things like the United Nations, things like global organizations, treaties, projects, fancy think tanks trying to say, hey, we are the ones who will run the world. We'll do it. But those towers of Babel, they can't survive when they confront the master of history himself. The master of history is going to reveal through history what it means when he says things like, my power is made perfect in weakness. My power is made perfect in weakness. Now, if that is the kind of hero of history that always wins by standing for the underdog, by standing for the vulnerable, not to scandalize those who have power, but to offer them an opportunity for redemption as well. But if this is the kind of master of history who stands with the weak and actually perfects his power in weakness, then that lets you know that no strong structure will be able to defeat him. Because the more folks try to pulverize people through their giant corporations and giant government schemes that make us weaker and make us, turned against each other, make us fight over who's the most victimized, make us lose our jobs, make us become tracked and monitored and surveilled like cattle. When we have this kind of situation, that's creating a lot of oppression. That's creating a lot of weakness. And whose power is made perfect in that scenario? The one who split time. The one who takes the side of those crucified, of those sacrificed by these big, giant behemoths that want to pulverize people who stand in their way. So any institution that continues to try to found its power based on marginalizing people, dividing people by race, dividing people by gender, dividing people by class, trying to demonize people who've worked hard to earn a living, and to make people feel ashamed of owning private property. Anybody who wants to gain their power by trying to pulverize people into weakness, they are only going to manifest more power for the master of history. Do you see how it works, folks? This is a trap. Those who want to have power, they're caught in a trap. They're caught in a snare. And there's nothing they can do about it. Another way to look at it is they who think they run things, those who think they're too smart to ever be held justice, those who think that they can map out the destiny of billions of people and have it all go according to their little plans. They are like ox. They're like a bunch of ox. And these oxen don't realize that the master of history has his chariot completely on them. And it's hard for them to kick against the pricks or the goads that links them to the master's chariot. So the ox, they think they're just going, but they don't really realize who's really calling the shots. And because they continually believe that the only way to solve problems is to create bigger and bigger government, bigger and bigger corporations, bigger and bigger media monopolies, bigger and bigger grandiose plans, treating human beings like little statistics rather than human beings. Don't even allow people to hug their family while they're having a funeral. These folks who treat humans in such despicable, anti-human ways, they cannot escape what's coming. History is moving in the direction in which the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I'm David Granosky. We will be back in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Senator Rasan has stood up for our community. He served as the president of the NAACP, fighting for your civil rights, and as a local personal injury attorney enforcing the rights of the injured. He passed Jordan's Law that reformed our child welfare system to save lives. Senator Rasan brought back millions of dollars for mental health resources. And during the pandemic, Senator Rasan pressured the state to hold the company who built the broken unemployment system accountable.
I'm Senator Darrell Rasan, and I'm asking for your vote to continue fighting for you.
Political advertisement paid for and approved by Darrell Rasan for State Senate District 19.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Kornowski. 727-587-1040 is the number if you want to call in. 727-587-1040. So the master of history is Jesus. He is controlling where things are going, and they happen not, and I'm not even speaking in a metaphysical lens, I'm talking about anthropology, understanding what Jesus accomplished in his project for humanity. These bozos in the tops of D.C. have been talking a big game. Oh, we're going to create a new world order. How's that new world order looking for you? It's nothing new. It has no order. It certainly doesn't have any control over the world. It's stinky. It's stupid. It's old. And yes, they have yesterday's banks and yesterday's TV channels and yesterday's losers running the social media ghettos they tried to create people through fraudulent means by presenting them as moderating message boards and then turning them into ridiculously pathetic political talking point machines that they've become now to protect career criminals like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, crooked cop as she is. But these clowns that, oh, we were going to create a new world order. Remember that? And of course, the populists were like, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world, the new world order. But now it's like out open and it looks pathetic. There's nothing new about it. There's no order to it. And they have no idea what the world's all about. It's all falling apart. Because the more people try to grasp for centralized power, the more it just falls on them. Falls apart. Jesus said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. So powerful, that point there. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. So he's talking to the chief priests and the Pharisees. And he's telling them that since you're not producing fruit, since you're continually creating the same violent hierarchy that you're subjected to by the Roman authorities, but you're creating your own mirror version of it, since you are stuck on religious self-righteousness and you're stuck on justifying your sacrificial violence towards others, then your leadership is not bearing fruit. And therefore, those who see my message, who do not have the same obsession with staying within that violent matrix, will have the opportunity to take that message and bear fruit, to produce results. So what does that mean? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. That's an old idiom from the Jewish community about the building of the temple. Is that the last stone, the stone the builders rejected. Why did they reject it? Because it was misshapen. It was different. Have you ever treated someone badly because they're different? Have you ever used someone as a punching bag because they think differently, or they look differently, or you're jealous of them? Have you ever made someone feel small or marginalized because they're just wired differently, or they have a different way of thinking, they have a different accent, they have a different background than you? Maybe they have a disability. Maybe they have an impairment. Maybe they're just quirky. Maybe they're a genius. Maybe they have some learning disabilities. Maybe they're too pretty, or maybe they're too disfigured, or maybe they're too tall, too short. Something that just makes you feel like you're justified in making them feel very aware of something that makes them different. If someone's got a weight problem, you want to make sure that you tell them that they do. If someone's short, you got to always let them know, hey, you came up short today, right? There's always something that humans feel the need to do to let stones that are a little misshapen feel rejected. So when we hear the word, the stone the builders rejected, we must first think of the building of the temple in which this saying was originally constructed. You can find it in Psalms. The stones the builders rejected. So remember, Peter goes on to talk about later that we are living stones, right? That we're living stones. So when you think of the word stone, I want you to think of humans. The stone the builders rejected. So whenever you treat someone differently and make them feel bad because they stutter, because they're have a learning disability, because they're quirky, because they're of a different ethnicity, maybe they're the only member of their gender in the office party, whatever it is, when you look at that so-called misshapen, and by that it just seems something shaped differently, person shaped differently, and they're attitude, their personality, their mind, their ideas. You treat them differently. You make them feel rejected by the way you point out their differences. You're participating in what the builders do. They reject the misshapen stone. It doesn't stick with the format of the project of the building. So humans like to get along. They want to do the same thing. They want to stick to the same script. And if you need to build a building project, and again, in this metaphor, remember Peter says we are living stones creating a new temple, right, for humanity in our lives, in our hearts. But if you treat someone differently and marginalize them and say, oh, you're this way, I want you to know that you are this way, you are acting like the builders by rejecting a misshapen stone. So when Jesus says the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, what does that mean? What that is referring to is the idea that when they were building the temple, that misshapen stone that was cast aside because it didn't have the right shape, couldn't fit into the grooves of the blueprint as nicely as all the other generic copycat stones or whatever. That misshapen stone finally found its place. Finally found its place. It becomes the cornerstone. They say, well, hey, we will use this as the ceremonial first stone that we will lay down. We'll use this misshapen stone to have the first stone laid as a ceremony. This is something that they actually did in the ancient world. Cornerstone ceremony to inaugurate a new building project, a new workmanship, a new temple, a new dam, a new grand castle, new city walls, walls of Jericho. Remember that? Those were built with cornerstone ceremonies. Very important. So when you think about a cornerstone, so that's a misshapen stone, it's not going to fit the normal pattern of the wall. Well, let's make it the cornerstone. Let's make it the first stone we lay. What is the significance of that? What does that mean? It's a very important message. What does it mean? We have to find this out. It's a riddle, if you will. It's a detective question for history. If you want to understand the headlines that we're in today, if you want to understand why it's so strange, this world that we're living in,
of 2020. Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett answering questions about an anti-abortion rights newspaper ad that she signed in 2006. Barrett says she was leaving church, expressing her views as a private citizen.
Now I'm a public official, and so while I was free to express my private views at that time, I don't feel like it is appropriate for me anymore because of the canons of conduct to express an affirmative view at this point in time.
Barrett had suggested in the past that the abortion law decision Roe v. Wade is not safe from being overturned. Today she was asked to define a super precedent.
Cases that are so well settled that no political actors and no people seriously push for their overruling. And I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicates that Roe doesn't fall in that category.
Judge Barrett says she's committed to judicial independence against political pressure. With continuing coverage, the Barrett confirmation hearing. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and I'm reflecting on why I don't think the people who want to act like they run the show, they've got all the media corporations spewing their same talking points, their same, parroting lines, right? And they have all these grand multi-billion dollar corporations and banks, and you got the Bank of International Settlements. Look it up. What is that? Oh my goodness. All these giant institutions. And it feels like, goodness, there's just, what are you going to do? I mean, it just seems like they are just so powerful. But at the same time, we also see cracks. We see that, oh man, they're not looking so hot anymore. They overplayed their power games with this political response to COVID. And now it's kind of coming back on them. It's kind of coming back. When you build a Tower of Babel because you want to be God, at some point, it might be too big for you to maintain. It might come falling down on top of you. And the reason why I think it's going to continually unfold in that way, of a crumbling Tower of Babel for the future, is that Jesus is in charge of history, and Jesus said that his power is made perfect in weakness. And so the more they try to render everybody weak in order to maintain their monopoly of power, monopoly banks, monopoly this, monopoly that, monopoly media, monopoly medicine, the more they try to exert their all-seeing eye over all of our lives, the more that weakness is transmuted by Jesus into cultural disgust and disillusionment with their grand projects of power. So when you look at these headlines of the media talking like PR firms for one particular party, and you see both parties mostly just continually spending and growing government and growing this and growing that, with some small good things coming too. You have to remember that it's like a good movie. Just when you think the hero is totally down and out, there's that one little mistake that the villain makes that collapses the whole project. Jesus is like Aikido. His way of destroying systems of power is a proactive way of allowing the systems of power to expand so much that they consume themselves, that they fall under their own weight. How did he defeat Rome? Rome had occupied his country, and they put him on their most brutal machine or system of or symbol of power and domination. And they tortured Jesus, accused him of bogus stuff. They accused him of nonviolent crimes, and they thought they had the justification to torture him for that reason. And they executed him on a cross. And within a few hundred years, Jesus had become the God of that same empire. And he took that cross that they used to torture him, and he made that cross a symbol that would start to direct people towards him, even if they didn't get it fully right, of course, in that time of Constantine imperial collusion with church. It was still planting seeds of that story during one of the reasons why the church was so effective was during the plague of Rome. It was the Christians who would go to the care of people. They would risk their life to take care of people. Pagans had never seen anything like it. What kind of people are these people who care about sick people in a plague? They were taught from their gods that if you got the plague, that means you were cursed by the gods. You were a bad person or a person who deserved it. And here the Christians, they had heard things from Jesus like God makes the rain fall on the just and the unjust. And so they were imitating a different kind of world order, which allowed them to have the courage to take care of people who were sick, no matter who they were. Before they got political corruption, the church was on fire for the message that Jesus originally had modeled for them. It got a little diluted when they had the power of the Roman church the Roman Empire come in and try to turn it into an official state religion. But when you're faced between being persecuted or the emperor saying, hey, we're going to protect you now, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, let's keep persecuting us and torturing us all. And of course, that power of the state is very intoxicating and hard to protect from once you get started on that path. But nevertheless, the point is that Jesus' way defeated the gods of Rome. Jesus' way defeated the people who thought they were king of the world. Jesus is more important than the Caesar who presided over his death. He's more important than Pontius Pilate. He's more important than King Herod who presided over his death. He's more important than any of those wannabe gods. They've been forgotten. He's more important than Jupiter, more important than Saturn, those gods. He outlasted them all. And his influence and ideas are way more contagiously spreading. Today, the most sacred person to be is to be the one that is perceived to be the most victimized. That is a direct influence of the work of Jesus in history. Secular historians like Tom Holland can tell you that. Go read his book, Dominion, one of the best world-class historians we have, particularly of that era, can show you in his book, Dominion, how radical of an impact Christianity had in history and overturning the different expectations of power, and by bringing empires to their knees. For example, it wasn't long after Christianity had taken root as the official religion of the empire that you saw the decline and the end of Colosseum games. Callimachus, a monk, was sick and tired of seeing people torn apart, and he came in there and protested it. He got inside the Colosseum and said, "Stop in the name of God, stop in the name of God." And it said that he was torn apart too. But that moment quickly led to the end of the last Colosseum games. And one could argue that without the Colosseum games, a decadent empire like Rome would not long last. Because if it can't handle its stuff in a peaceful way, like Jesus says, then it must persist in having violent, sacrificial violence, like the Colosseums represented. And then if you end that sacrificial violence ritual of the gladiator games, then where's that violence going to spill out onto? It's going to spill out into the conflicts of people neighbor to neighbor. It's going to spill out into conflicts and rivalries, breaking the empire apart, which is exactly what happened shortly after the end of the Colosseum games. So when you look at this passage that I referred to earlier, remember when he says, anyone who falls on this stone, the stone that the builders rejected, will be broken to pieces. Sounds like the Roman Empire. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. Again, that sounds like what happened to the Roman Empire. They crucified Jesus. They tried to reject that misshapen stone. But then they ended up trying to adopt it and water it down. And it allowed Jesus' message of peace to spread despite their, paganization of some of his attributes and teachings and model of peace and nonviolence. And as they persisted in their addiction to sacrificial bloodshed like the Colosseum games, eventually Jesus' project of misshapen stones led to one of his followers, Telemachus, ending the Colosseum bloodshed games. And he ended it by being sacrificed. That's what it means, power made perfected in power perfected in weakness. It's in Telemachus' tenderness and his vulnerability of coming to the aid of people being torn apart by lions, ripped apart to screaming crowds, and him coming in the midst of that and risking his life. That weakness manifests the power of the new master of history, because guess what happens? It impacts that crowd and people who watched it, and it spreads and it spreads, and everybody says, you know what, I guess we've had enough of these antiquated pagan sacrificial rituals called Colosseum. And once they stopped it, because they didn't fully get rid of that violent appetite started spilling out because they couldn't channel it into their rituals anymore. So Christianity was maturing the Roman Empire, but they weren't maturing fast enough, such that violence that was contained in wars and contained in Colosseum, now that the church is starting to affect some of these things and stop the sacrifices, that violence can then spill out into the communities, which causes the breaking apart of the empire. What do you think that means when he says, anyone who falls on this stone, the misshapen stone that is Jesus and his project of those who imitate him in the defense of the weak, in the defense of the victim, in a nonviolent way, anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. That includes the Roman Empire, that includes all empires, and that includes the wannabe empire builders of our time. They're trying to imitate Jesus in a cheap and fake way by acting like their empire of banks and media monopolies are all in the name of the victim. But when you peel that veneer off, you see very quickly that they've got a whole body bag of victims and subjugation going on. And even if they try to imitate the Lamb of God at one point or another, we start to see that they're just a bunch of wolves in that lamb clothing. And we start to see that they're grand, unified monopolies of media, monopolies of entertainment, monopolies of law, monopolies of regulation, monopolies of surveillance and data collection. We start to see through it, and we start to wise up, and we start to create alternatives to their power sources. And we start to move away, and those empires start to be what? Broken to pieces, as Jesus says. We'll be back in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
He was one of the greatest Major League Baseball pitchers. This is Greg C. Truax with On the Point. Bob Gibson was a player to watch over 17 years of spring training with the St. Louis Cardinals in St. Petersburg. Sun-soaked fans would sit in bleacher seats at Al Lang Stadium as the Redbird right-hander threw fastballs and nasty sliders in Grapefruit League games. Mr. Gibson recalled he struck out 17 Detroit Tigers in Game 1 of the '68 World Series, passed away recently at age 81. A tough competitor, he recorded 5 20-win seasons and 56 career shutouts. He received 2 Cy Young Awards and was voted the National League's most valuable player before retiring in 1975. Bob Gibson and spring training in St. Petersburg, always remembered. This is Greg C. Truax.
The following message is brought to you by Moffitt Cancer Center.
Hi, I'm Jan Berry. The leading cancer among women is breast cancer. I am a breast cancer survivor.
Hi, and I'm Richard Gosmartin. The leading cause of cancer among men is prostate cancer. I am a prostate cancer survivor.
I had very little symptoms and was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer.
And I had no symptoms when I was diagnosed with stage 1 prostate cancer.
October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whatever the month is, I urge you to get tested.
September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Trust me, guys, it can save your life. Get tested.
Our marketing partners bring you this vital message as a reminder to get tested. Do it for yourself. Do it for your family.
And your life can depend on it.
Moffitt Cancer Center. Move for what matters. Miles for Moffitt virtual event on October 24th. milesformoffitt.com.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and we're happy to have this time with you. I want to give you a quick heads up. In the next hour, whether you're listening live on radio or whether you're listening by podcast or our stream, you'll want to check out the next segment coming up. It's my exclusive interview with Prince Ermias Haile Selassie, who is the president of the Crown Council of Ethiopia. He is the grandson of the Emperor Haile Selassie, who was the last emperor of Ethiopia, which was a dynasty going back to the days of Solomon, going back to their lineage in the Old Testament. So it's a very fascinating discussion. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it's going to be amazing. You're going to want to stick around. This will be a really interesting look, a first-person perspective of the last Christian emperor who was on the throne prior to the Marxist revolution that violently overthrew their family that had been there since the Solomonic times. So you don't want to miss it. I'm telling you, I told you, A Neighbor's Choice, it's like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for adults. You never know who's going to show up. Sometimes it's Detective John Beza. Other times it's physicist Dr. Yu. Other times it's classical composer Stephen Limbaugh. Other times it's Prince Ermia Selassie of the Ethiopian Empire. You never know who shows up, but it all has one principle. It's all about applying the personhood revolution of Jesus and learning how to see things with crystal clarity, the way he sees things. Learning how to look at history for the patterns that emerge. Learning how to see the first shall be last, the last shall be first. Do not resist evil with violence. Leave the 99 and go after the one. All these different messages that he's saying in Jesus' life, they have real world effect on your life and the headlines you see around you in history. And if we don't learn them and imitate them, we will really be in a world of hurt. But I've been talking about this passage today that Jesus says, the stone the builders rejected, that's him, has become the cornerstone. That's him. The Lord has done this, and it's marvelous in our eyes. So he's quoting from Psalms. And you hear this theme of stones a lot. Now, Jesus was most likely, my friend Jerry Boyer and some of the others has pointed me towards the idea that he was most likely a stone mason, that the text, we typically call him a carpenter, but the word that's actually used in the New Testament for his profession was tekton, like an artist, an artisan. So it was more likely in that region would not be cabinetry as more because of the stonework that was being done in that region in Galilee. He was a stonemason. So when you see the stone metaphor, it has a lot more deeper layers than you might be led to believe at first glance. So the stone the builders rejected because it's misshapen has become the cornerstone. Now this is interesting because in the Bible, you'll see this thing about cornerstone and capstone, that God is building a cornerstone and a capstone. And you're like, okay, what is it? Is it a cornerstone? Is it a capstone? What's the difference? What does it matter? Well, I'm going to give you just a little something to chew on for this. The cornerstone, as I was saying earlier, remember they wanted to tear down the walls of Jericho. It's because those walls were built at the foundation stones with human sacrifices. So it was a wicked, decadent, pagan society. And there's a curse about if you rebuild the walls of Jericho again, it will cost you your firstborn's life. That was a ritual of human sacrifice that was attached to that city. It was caught up in the idea of might makes right. Same thing that we have today. Oh, we can lock down the whole world and kill millions of people in developing worlds because some people were afraid of this virus to the point where they have to have 10-year-olds stay away, even though 99.9% of children are having no death problems or anything with this virus. So we're going to kill millions of children, women, elderly, everybody. They don't matter because we can just sacrifice people. That's the sick world, old world order that we're dealing with today. That's just one example. Then you go into the wars, you go into the bailouts for the banks, the Federal Reserve, all these disgusting little sacrificial machines that we're supposed to just sit there. They're all falling apart. It doesn't look like it, but they are overextending themselves, and their power will be destroyed by the stone the builders rejected. So the cornerstone was the stone where they would lay. It was misshapen, and they would lay the first stone to consecrate the building of a new project. But the capstone is also, so it's kind of a weird thing. It's like you put these things together and it can be confusing. The capstone was this misshapen stone that you put on at the end of the building project to say that the project was complete. Jesus is the cornerstone and the capstone. That's the way you understand it. He is the first stone laid, meaning he's the first victim of mankind. When Cain was jealous of his brother Abel, because Abel had privilege. Remember that? Abel was he had toxic privilege. So Cain was jealous of Abel's privilege, so he murdered Abel in jealousy, and on that murder he founds the first city. So in the Bible it says that that basically Abel's blood was crying out for revenge because he was unjustly murdered. But in Hebrews, it says that Jesus' blood cries a better word than Abel's, that he sees. He also says that they've been killing, Jesus also said that they've been killing the prophets since the foundation of the world. And they've been covering it up with lies and murder ever since. And that he's come to reveal things hidden since the foundation of our social world, our culture, our history. So what is it that I'm saying here? What I am saying, and it won't do justice in this moment, but to unpack it all, but we'll give as much as we can. What I am suggesting is that the Cornerstone was the first victim of history. Everywhere we go around world history, we see all the great cities and buildings of ancient societies had live bodies and victims sacrificed in the cornerstones. You peel off that stone, you'll see bodies in there. And Jesus is saying, I am the first. I am the Alpha, the first victim. Abel is the symbol of the first victim. But I am also the capstone. That is the misshapen stone that you rejected it because at first it didn't look like all the other stones. Too fat, too short, too different, too smart, too eccentric, too creative, too whatever. Different color, different whatever. So he's rejected and he becomes the capstone. That's the final stone. Remember that saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega? I am the first stone that was rejected, and I am the last stone, the capstone, which is rejected. I am the first victim, and I am the last victim of the old order of doing things. Meaning, ever since they crucified Jesus, he's unleashed a new project where we're not going to get away with sacrificing people and maintaining our empires that way. That's why Rome was destroyed after it encountered the stone of his message. Because wherever the story of Jesus goes, it defends the victims. It exposes where the bodies are. And it does not allow us to continue the old status quo of founding our power systems, our ideologies, our banks, our governments, our cultures on these sick, sacrificial, brutal ways of doing things. So when he says, I am the capstone, that means he's the last stone. He's the last sacrifice. That's why he said, it is finished. What is finished? That old order of sacrificing and getting away with it. They did that in the Persian Empire. They did that in all the empires, the Greek Empire, Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire. They always did it. That was the status quo. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Aztecs, Mayan, whatever. But in the New World Order, even though people are still trying to do sacrifice, and they do it in Jesus' name, unfortunately, and they do it in their attempts to try to say we're politically correct, so we're more Christian than Jesus. All of it, if you still use violence, if you're still locking people up for nonviolent crimes, if you're still bombing people because it helps your friends in high places and their innocent lives, all of it's going to come crumbling down. That's the good news. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.